Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. What if the hardest part of being a CTO wasn't about the technology at all, but learning to lead without a map? My guest today is Etienne de Bruin, founder of Seven CTOs and CTO Levels, and co-author of the upcoming book, Liquid. For over a decade, Etienne has guided CTOs from the codebase to the executive table. In this conversation, we uncover how the role is evolving, the traps that catch even the best leaders, and why the 4 sentinels revealed in Liquid may be the key to thriving as a CTO. I'm your host, Adam Horner. As a coach, I help CTOs from startups to enterprises to lead with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact. And before we get into the CTO Levels framework, I want to share some things that I've built to help you on your leadership journey. If you've ever felt like there's no playbook for being a CTO, then you're not alone. I've been there too, and I hear it every week from the CTOs and tech leaders that I coach and work with. That's why I started this podcast over a year ago, because technology leadership is challenging, and figuring it out alone makes it even harder. Now I've brought everything together under one roof. The CTO Playbook is a home for this podcast, a growing community of CTOs and coaching programs designed to help you grow as a technology leader. If you think about your leadership journey like a mountain hike, a climb with many routes, then CTO Basecamp helps you build breadth and clarity into the foundations of your role. CTO Elevate is going to sharpen your strategic impact. And CTO Ascent, that's a path you can take anytime. It's your personalized coaching journey designed around your specific needs, whether you're just starting out or already leading at the highest level. Your path, your pace, your playbook. The first CTO Basecamp cohorts are now available to book and help technology leaders strengthen and broaden their leadership foundations. If you're ready to stop figuring it out all the hard way and start leading with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact, reserve your spot on the October cohort that suits you. You can learn more about CTO Basecamp, CTO Ascent, and what's coming in the near future with CTO Elevate at www.thectoplaybook.com. But now let's switch from mountains to levels and have a chat with Etienne. Etienne, welcome to the CTO Playbook. It's absolutely great to have you here.
I have been a long-time watcher of your shows and the little LinkedIn clips, so I'm happy to be with you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the same. And unfortunately, I don't have quite the background and track record that you do, but I'm definitely going to be working on it from now onwards. Almost 10 years coaching. It's an amazing thing to come across somebody who's a bit of a legend in the CTO coaching space.
Wow. I'm flattered. I guess I've just been at it so hard that you don't look up and see, oh, there's a whole bunch of people like behind you doing stuff. And I'm inspired. I'm inspired by what you're doing. Just to see all the people coming out with new frameworks and ideas to serve the CTO persona. I love it. And I'm learning a lot. I really am.
And it's a much needed space. I find that there's a lot of CTOs who are coming into the role, some for the first time, some have been in the role for quite a while, and they look around and think, hang on, I could do better than I'm doing at the moment. So it's actually fantastic to see the number of coaches coming into the space at the moment. I remember when I first became a CTO at Satago, I'll admit the hardest part for me at that time was letting go of the code, of the tech, being hands-on. And my co-founder and I kind of split the responsibility. So he faced outward, taking sales and investment and marketing, and I faced inward with obviously the technology, but also things like HR and processes and so on. It was quite tempting to stay in the tech. It felt safe. But eventually I kind of realized that the business needed more from me as a leader than really as a coder. So one of the things I'd love to sort of try and touch with you on is thinking back on your own journey. Was there a similar moment for you when you sort of realized that the CTO role meant, stepping out of the code base?
Well, I was going to ask you how you felt, because I remember being told that my value is less and less about my code and more about my leadership, long before I actually came to terms with it and actually accepted it. And it was a very, very difficult process for me. I was confused. I was upset. I think I was a little depressed because I loved coding so much and I felt like I was really good at it, and I could pull out POCs and MVPs in a 24-hour period that blew my peers' minds. And so to have my co-founder tell me, our team, I think, was going to about 10 plus engineers. I think we were reaching like maybe 15. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, "You do know that you have to stop coding." And I was like, it's like, you're crazy. And I think my developers may have gone to the CEO and said, "Can you just tell him to stop submitting PRs?" So it was a very difficult period for me. Yeah, it was very difficult. So I'm curious to know how you felt. Like when your co-founder said that, did you feel, "Oh, I get it, I'm in," or did you feel cold and lonely like I did?
So for me, I definitely felt the cold and loneliness thing, but I was not really pushed by my co-founder. I was actually the other way around. I sort of came to the realization: hang on, I can do this myself, or I can actually leverage one of the other team members to do it. While I was quite good and quite effective, I was never one of those elite coders. So when I brought on somebody who had background in investment banking and a background in working for Facebook, he was an elite coder. So I was sort of able to delegate things to him and sort of code around and blink, and he'd done it. I was like, okay, hang on a minute, I'm being outclassed here. My value is not in the code base. I'm not better than this guy. I'm actually going to have more impact, helping him and the rest of the team to do their thing. And so for me, it was sort of slammed in my face with facts and reality, rather than being dragged kicking and screaming into that position. So so I definitely felt the same thing. And it's interesting that you had a push from your co-founder for that. And because I think that's one of those things that people definitely don't get. I think one of the things I'd love to do though, Etienne, is because there's a bunch of my listeners who may not have come across you, because you're really well known, in the US. You've got 7 CTOs, you've got a couple of things that you've got going on that you're really well known for. But perhaps you could just scoot back a little bit and just sort of give a brief introduction to yourself, and then put into context that sort of dragging, kicking, and screaming out of the code base.
Actually, that's a great segue, because you'll understand why I had such a chip on my shoulder. So I am South African. I was born in the 70s. I'm 53 at the time of this recording. I was raised in apartheid South Africa and was lucky to see the fall of the apartheid regime when I was at university. And so I had a profound sort of coming of age, just the Rainbow Nation.
Yeah, talk about living through history.
Oh yeah, we lived that history. There's two histories we lived, and that was Nelson Mandela and searching for Sugar Man. I mean, that was literally, if you've seen that movie, that was our guy. Those are two lived histories. But, maybe this is a cliche for so many of us, but I discovered programming. It's so funny. I was listening to DHH talk on a podcast the other day, and he basically, the way he learned how to code was exactly the way I learned how to code, which is exactly like so many people I know, which is you discover a PC. In my case, it was an Atari 800 XL. So shout out to all my people who learned how to code BASIC on an Atari. And, my idea of fun was to have my buddies come over and read code from a magazine so I could type it in, and then subsequently endure my wrath as they forgot to mention a parentheses or a semicolon. But yeah, I was born to code, man.
Because reading syntax is so easy, isn't it?
And it's funny because the magazines were all from the UK, and English is our second language. Afrikaans, which is a Dutch dialect, was our first language. And, it's not easy to describe a curly brace to some, 12-year-old kid who doesn't know how to speak English. But, I was lucky, and I don't know if you feel this, but I just knew from a young age that I was going to code. Like, I was going to build stuff on a computer. And I think we were very lucky to have that. And so I got my degree at Stellenbosch University. That's where I met my wife. And this is very interesting, is I got addicted to the internet because South Africa had a boycott against it. So no records, no artists, no, nothing that was pop culture was making it to South Africa because of the cultural boycotts, because of apartheid. And when I went to my computer lab, they had IRC running on some VAX mainframe machine.
Yeah, that's Internet Relay Chat for those people who are old enough.
Yes, I cannot tell you what it did for me, that I could type words and sentences to people in America and in Europe and just have these conversations. It was absolutely profound. And I think that was kind of the early internet was very global. Yes. And it was again, I think for South Africans of my generation, it was a profound discovery. And I used it to manipulate people to send me CDs.
Right.
And I'm slightly ashamed, even in this moment, telling you that, because now I'm realizing how that sounds. But, compact discs were sort of coming out, and we had no access to music. Like, it was very expensive. And so I had my favorite bands that I had to read about, and every now and again was able to listen to on the radio. And anyways, so I think that's where my sense of community, using the internet for exchanging ideas. I mean, I know that's, kind of what the internet is about, but back in those days, it
was pretty novel, wasn't it?
Yeah, back in those days, I saw the potential of what email and internet relay chat could do. So, and then I was able to, my wife and I got married, and then we moved to Germany because I was very involved in the early days of BSD Unix, and I was building device drivers for encryption cards with a local South African startup.
Wow, so low level in the kernel then.
Yes, there was an acquisition, and I was one of the few people who had an opportunity to go over, and my wife and I decided to pack our bags.
Awesome.
Because this is the other thing, people of my generation were encouraged to travel overseas because our parents were boycotted against traveling. So it's a very, not to belabor the point, but I'm just talking about the timing of my awakening. But so then I went to Germany, spent 3 years there trying to release products that the Germans just were not satisfied with. And then I said to Kath one day, you know what, I can't do this anymore. They wanted 20 megabits throughput through my device driver, through an encryption card. I could only get it to 15 megabits. And they were like, well, you didn't get it to 20. So, you failed us. I was like, dude, I got it to 15.
State of the art was probably much lower than that at the time.
Yes, I think back in those days, it was 100 megabit backbones. And yeah, so it was an achievement to have full triple DES encryption at 20 megabits. 15 megabits was awesome. Anyways, and then in 2000, we moved to the United States. We moved to San Diego just because we hadn't really felt like we had finished seeing the world to go back to South Africa. And then we got stuck in San Diego. I would say it's the cycle of visa applications kind of turned 2 years into 5 years into 10 years. We got our green cards. And by that time, we started having children, and so we decided to stay.
Yeah.
So, and now we live in Salt Lake City.
After a while, it just becomes home, right?
Yeah, I think it's a tragedy. The South African tragedy is that so many South Africans are overseas. I'd like to be home with my people, but it's not in the cards.
Yeah, I think it's true of the whole world. I think it's just become a lot more global, and there's a lot more people outside of the country. There were, as an immigrant myself into Sweden, I've been here for 6 years. My wife has lived in 6 countries, I think, now. So, in terms of that, I just think the world is becoming a lot more global, and there's a lot more people who are living, outside the country that they were born in. But in that time, it seems you've achieved some significant things.
Yes, I built a startup with a co-founder. He had an idea for a content management system, which back in those days, the early 2000s, if you wanted to have a web 2.0 app, you had to stand up your own database and, the whole thing. So he had an idea for a CMS as a SaaS. I was hungry for a challenge. And so him and I co-founded a company, which 10 years later we sold. And this was the guy who told little old me, who was born to code, hey, your value to me and to our company is to stop coding. And I was very upset. I really struggled with that, Adam. It definitely was a throw my toys out of the cot moment. My first reaction was to get upset with him because what did he know?
Yeah.
And so he was right. And I think that's where I had a moment like, what is a CTO? I think CTO really became a thing maybe with like Facebook, or like it wasn't really a term in the SaaS world that was widely adopted or spoken of. So the reason I started Seven CTOs was because I just didn't know what a CTO really did, and I knew I had to talk to people. And my friend my co-founder had a CEO group, which I actually tried to join, and I realized there's no way I can describe to these. Back in those days, the abstraction of hardware was a big thing, like cloud and bare metal. And I wasn't going to have those conversations with non-technical people. And so, yeah, Seven CTOs was born in 2012.
Right.
And my idea was just basic peer group conversations where we can duke it out. Like, I wanted to duke it out with people who understood what I was saying, could call me out on my own behavioral patterns, could call me out on lazy thinking without me feeling like they didn't know what they were saying. And so, yeah, so I'm really
somebody who's a genuine peer who had that level of knowledge and respect that meant that you could take it at face value rather than questioning yourself and questioning them. And
absolutely.
And I think that sense of community is something that is so unique amongst the CTO groups. And there really aren't that many of them. I mean, the Seven CTOs, which is, as you've mentioned, now quite broad, and several hundred companies in the US member of Seven CTOs, is that right?
Yep.
And then across other places, there's other networks. So there's the RANDS Slack, which is another network. There's the CTO Craft in Europe.
Yes, CTO Craft. Yeah, I think...
And then there's a couple of smaller groups. But there's not a huge number of them, are there?
Yes, I mean, Peter Bell did some amazing work with the CTO Connection and CTO Summits. Yeah, there are a couple pioneers from the 2010s, I would say, that when people were still trying to grapple what it even meant to be a CTO, I think there were a couple of people who raised their hands. And I think Andy from CTO Craft was right there with us. Like, I remember Peter, Andy, and I doing a couple phone calls together, just talking about how we were going to build our networks. And I think Andy's doing really well with CTO Craft. That thing's exploded.
Yeah, I mean, they just had their first North American conference in Toronto, which went really well. So that's been a success. They've got another one. They had one in Germany, and they've got another one coming up. So, I mean, I have to say, I actually also have done a few mixes for CTO Craft here in Sweden, and I intend to keep doing them.
Yeah.
It's a great group and a great support network. So, thoroughly understand from that perspective where it's coming from, in terms of how that sort of companionship helps.
Absolutely.
But one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is, when you're teaching and you're mentoring, clearly that memory, that experience of yourself of trying to sort of cross that gap between, from the tech to the business side of it was clearly very influential on your approach. But apart from that sort of stepping away from code wrenching moment, what do you think were the biggest gaps in your skill set when you stepped into leadership that really pushed you towards, okay, I've got to find some other folks to sort of test my ideas against?
I think probably one of the most prevalent memories I have, which I think is probably a disease with our people, is that we think we're right. And very often we are right. If you think about it,
because my wife tells me this all the time.
I have spoken to thousands of CTOs, and honestly, in almost all the cases where they are arguing about a technology strategy, questioning the market, crying about the competency of the C-suite, in most of those cases, they are right. I mean, we are so good at the logical deductions, the complexity calculators. Like, we're very, very good at observing situations, inputs, and all that, and then calculating outcomes. I mean, I think that's what we have to be very, very good at, is prediction machines that can just say, hey, yes, if we build it this way, if we bring in these people, if we make this type of investment, then this is what we can do and this is what can't be done. And I think a lot of people in the CTO role is very good with that. But I think what we really suck at is being wrong, like just flat out wrong. And the wrong isn't necessarily about the stuff that we're good at. It's the stuff that we were really bad at.
Now, one of those things I find is being able to tell the narrative of a story, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's like you can get all the logic right, you can get the conclusion correct, but if you've lost people along the way, if you haven't brought them with a story, with a hero that they can relate to and a guide that's going to take them there, if you lose them on that journey, all the logic in the world isn't going to save you from that perspective. And I think that's one of those areas, exactly as you say,
absolutely,
we can be right, but we kind of, win the battle but lose the war.
Yes, yes. And I think the moment that happened for me, as you asked, was I was in an executive sync up with this company we founded. And the CEO and the COO were talking about some ways in which we could do some expansion revenue because we had hit a little bit of a growth plateau. And I just went to the whiteboard and I just started drawing like, oh, we could create like a single sign-on thing back when single sign-on was a really novel idea. We can create this ID and we can track this analytics. And I started drawing stuff on the whiteboard and I think I must have been talking for 15 minutes because when I looked around, I saw the CEO and the COO hunched over a laptop on a spreadsheet. And they were starting to plan and build into our quarterly planning how we were going to build this and afford to build this. And that's when I had like a uh-oh moment. I was like, you know what? I am unchecked, unbridled. I am irresponsible. Like I solve old problems with new ideas. I'm an ideas guy. And because I can build, anything is possible for me. But it's not necessarily the right thing for the company. And that's when I realized,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I have to talk to other CTOs because I could be dead wrong on this commitment that the CEO and COO were ready to make because of my, I got the company there on my technology prowess. And so my influence was too much and my reach was too strong for my own good. And so when I turned around there and I looked at them, I can feel it like it still happened yesterday. Like, you know what? I have to find other CTOs that I can run this idea by so that they can tell me that I'm full of it or that I'm overestimating some things. And so that was my moment where I felt like the very first, wow, dude, you really are full of yourself, aren't you? Like I was like, dude, I am a monster. And now that we have 20, 30, 40 employees.
So catching yourself before you could set expectations you couldn't live up to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I started realizing that the technology that I built was employing people. And if I committed us down the wrong track, that we were going to get into trouble. And the thing is, my two co-founders, we brought on a third co-founder, they were not, they were very smart people. And so it's not like they were just eating it up, but they weren't technical. And so they really did rely on my understanding. And so that's when I thought, okay, you know what? This whole CTO thing is a lot harder than I thought it would be. And so that's when I started mixing with others.
Wow. So you had a good sort of eyes wide open moment there where you sort of realized what you were about to step into and caught yourself. I think there's a lot of CTOs who don't manage to catch themselves at that stage. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of potholes on the CTO journey. I mean, I remember vividly coaching a CTO who had a senior engineer who was severely resisting change. And his whole strategy kind of depended on this change. And he just didn't have the exposure. He hadn't seen leaders handle that before. He hadn't have the tools. And that's when I taught him a very basic framework, right? And it was a game changer for how he approached the situation. But if you've not seen it, if you've not been exposed to it, if you don't know, you don't know. And so therefore you can't catch yourself. I think you were, in retrospect, really lucky that you caught yourself at that moment and sort of thought, oh, I'm about to set myself a trap. I'm going to fall into it if I don't watch myself.
Yes. I'm thankful for that moment. And so I started hosting a few dinners. And I think I accidentally did some market research, but I started hosting some dinners, found out that there was a plenty of CTOs that were uncertain about what success looked like. And then I started going, when I went to conferences, I remember I went to a Ruby conference and then I went to a Rails conference. I just decided to host a CTO dinner in that city.
Right.
And then before I knew it, I had 300.
So just alongside the conference then, basically.
Yes. And before I knew it, I had 300 CTOs on my very interested list. They were loving the dinners, friendships were brewing, but I wasn't satisfied with that. Even with that success, the dinner and the chat approach, I was not satisfied because I felt like the level of intervention that I need from my peers goes far beyond my comfort levels, my feel good levels, my validation levels. I wanted to be challenged because I realized I had some very strong opinions about stuff, and it was going to take trust, emotional intelligence, accountability, determination to actually have the hard conversations. And so I actually felt inside of me this growing discontent with, oh, I'm going to have a dinner. Oh, where is it going to be? The venue, the sponsor, the blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I'm not
Right.
interested in I'm not interested in stroking the CTO's ego, or even worse, having them be satisfied with mediocrity. Like, I wanted us to be a new breed of people. And that's when I decided to form what then became Seven CTOs, and started asking CTOs to pay me money so we could have group chats. And that's when I lost all 300 people in one night.
Right. Wow. Because they wouldn't step up to that level of going to that sort of deep, trusting conversations.
No. I think there were two. Yes, I want to acknowledge a guy called Harold who was like, okay, dude, you wanted me to pay you $300 a month? I'll do it. And then I barely scraped together the 7 CTOs. I think I had to beg the 7th CTO, just please, dude, just try it out. I beg you, just help me be 7 people.
Right.
And that's when I realized, okay, this isn't going to be just your average scientific peer review, peer council. We're going to go deep on issues that are holding us back. And I have a feeling that that's probably the differentiator with 7 CTOs to this day, which is we are doing deep ontological coaching with our members. Like, we're going pretty deep. And so I'm really proud of the caliber of people that are coming out of the program.
Yeah. Because I noticed that both you and Kathy are, qualified ontological coaches. I actually had to go and look up ontological coaching. So for our listeners, do you think you could just sort of sketch out what is ontological coaching and how is it different? Why is it so effective for tech leaders?
Yes. I have to thank my wife for this. My wife is a marriage and family therapist. And during COVID, I was able to kind of just get a sense with her trainings. I've never really observed my wife's craft.
Right.
And until it was COVID time, and I actually listened to her do trainings. And I was like, wow, this is really fascinating, because she's training other therapists in a modality that was important to them and all that. But I thought to myself, you know what? I realized because I'd started coaching people because of 7 CTOs. Like, people would say to me, hey, can you coach us? Can you be a fractional for us? And, I had another epiphany where I was like, you know what? I'm actually not coaching people. I'm just kind of living regurgitating my past of what worked and didn't work, and sort of mapping it on this person's situation and doing pattern recognition, and then sounding like I know something. And I was like, I was very discontent with that approach. I personally do not believe that you have to have been a successful X in order to be a coach for X. Mm-hmm. If you do ontological coaching, which really focuses on shifting a person's, it's called the way of being, so kind of how you are in this world, how you be in this world is really the ontological coaching mechanism, and it focuses on, like, especially on how you speak. So you really listen for not what the person says, but the words that they're using to describe a situation. It focuses, of course, on emotions and moods, where the emotional state is a predisposition towards certain actions. And then, of course, some how you carry yourself, physically. So how you look, how you speak. And so what I love about the ontological way is it really encourages you to go into a coaching session without any preconceived ideas about what you're going to say, what they're going to say. You don't have a right wrong judgment. You really are a partner, and they really emphasize the partnership that you enter into with your client. And ontologically, the way I view this conversation that you and I are having is we really are fostering a partnership. We're kind of saying things to each other. We're measuring responses. We're reading each other.
Yeah.
But that is simply the vehicle by which we are actually creating something that is unique to what the two of us are going to talk about and is a unique to our partnership. And that is why I love ontological coaching. I want to plug Accomplishment Coaching. Go Google that. I got my certification through them. And it's a life-changing experience for me because now I feel like I can be a consultant as a CTO, like I can consult based on just having the same skills that you have.
Yeah.
Or I can be a coach and I can just be there with someone to listen to how they speak, to observe the way that they are being in this world. And it's astonishing for me to see how many of our CTOs, how many of our people are brilliant intellectuals. Like I said to you earlier, probably right in what they're saying. But boy, if you look at their language, if you look at their moods, if you look at the way they carry themselves, basically useless.
And it's just a very different, outcome in terms of what their language is portraying versus what they actually know and understand. Is that what you mean?
Yes. So one thing that I will give as an example is I was new to this ontological coaching and I was approached by someone, a very, very stunning CTO that I thought, oh my goodness, I've got nothing to give this guy. He's like order of magnitude larger than what I have ever done. But he wanted to talk to me and we jumped on a call and he basically said to me, he needs to hire 50 people very quickly. How can what do I recommend he does to fill up his hiring funnel? Because he saw me online and he's like, you seem like you know your stuff. And meanwhile, I've never had to hire 50 people at the same time. I've never had that sort of nightmare. But then through the ontological lens, I started listening to what he was saying, and the language that he used was actually duress. And I started saying to him, oh, when you say you have to hire them like yesterday, like what do you mean by yesterday? Sorry, this is going to sound a little coachy or therapy, but really digging into what is the language that you're using and why are you using that language? And to cut a long, effective coaching session short, by the time we were done, he was weeping. And it turned out that the CEO had given him a vote of no confidence and that the CEO was actually giving him an impossible task so that he could be fired. And if I was just going to be my doofus self, I would have just been like, oh, yes, get on LinkedIn and, put out some programming chat, blah, blah. And I would have just gone into the hiring funnel problem solution. But after a solid 30 to 40 minutes of listening to him, I was able to say, hey, you can actually solve this problem yourself, can't you? And he was like, yes. So why are you going to spend, because he had 60 days to do it because it was a seasonal sell.
Right.
I said to him, you're the best guy to solve this problem, aren't you? And he's like, yes. It's like, well, why don't you code this solution yourself? And you could have sworn that I was Santa Claus having him sit on my lap and giving him the gift of his life. He was like, wow, I can't believe you just said that. I said, yes. You have this construct in your brain of the role of CTO and you can't live up to it, and your CEO is seeing it and is rightfully feeling like you're not the right guy for the job. Meanwhile, what got you to this place was your ability to stand up all these virtual servers to deal with this pending influx they were going to have. Then why don't you take a couple of days and just go do your magic? And it worked. He did that. And he basically saved, not only that, the CEO it's going to sound a little self-indulgent, but I was shocked as an observer to this method. I was shocked that it worked so well.
Right.
And I was simultaneously mad with myself for thinking that I could coach people based on my past successes and failures. I do not believe that because you're a CTO, you can coach other CTOs. I think there's probably various degrees of success there where you can maybe commiserate together or you can encourage someone. And that is my hot take a little bit, which is I think you should go get some coaching training. You should become a coach, like understand whatever modality you want to be in, but understand that you got to decouple your past experiences and expertise and strong opinions. You got to decouple that from your mouth.
Yeah.
Disconnect that.
It's the same parable as the person who rushes in to fix things as soon as they hear the problem, isn't it?
Isn't that amazing? It's the exact trait that you and I are coaching people not to do is the exact trait that CTOs are helping each other with, which is solving each other's problems. So I don't know, man. If I watch this back, I might be a little disappointed in how animated I got, but that's why ontological coaching to me is a game changer.
But that's what we live for, to see the passion and the reason and the drive behind why we do what we do. So for me, I wouldn't be ashamed of that at all. I think that's something to be proud of. And I think it's one of those things that when you see it come out, you understand the real vigor and passion you have behind it. I think that's entirely valid.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that's interesting to me as well is that you've seen not only the role of the CTO, but the role of coaching of the CTO change quite significantly. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, you've clearly seen wonderful differences, and you've obviously seen some differences that actually, it's not that much different. What is there, do you think, in the CTO role that remains relatively invariant as hardware, virtualization, crypto, LLMs have come and eventually will go again?
Such a great question, because I actually just made a YouTube video about this that I think I just published it actually a couple of days ago.
Got to go check that out then.
Where you must see this, Adam, probably the most active posts on LinkedIn in your and my sphere is when one of us goes out there to decide, well, this is the role of the CTO, this is what it is, and this is what it is not. Whenever I see that post, I always see triple-digit comments and, everyone expounding on, well, it depends. Well, if it's just like, okay, and then so I just decided I'm going to make the video that just once and for all clarifies how I see the role. And the role to me does not change. So I think that is the biggest lesson I've learned over the last 10 years, 15 years of being in sort of network community coaching mode, is the CTOs who are wildly successful, well-respected, highly desired and coveted by the market. They know one thing, and that is ultimately to me what the role of CTO is. And that is, number one, the role of CTO, first and foremost, understands the business growth engine. So there's another way of saying that you understand the business. Secondly, the CTO is able to take that growth engine and align it with a technology vision for that business. And then through financial prowess, and I emphasize financial prowess, is able to then hire a team and manage that team with precision so that it can fuel the business growth engine.
So always coming back to the financials and the metrics and understanding that.
Yes. So for me, it is an art that any CTO should embrace. And what I've learned in my experience over the years is that the financial component, the ability to make something happen in the business, is something that any CEO, any C-suite will covet, which is the ability to say, I understand what the gap financials are. I understand what an operating margin is. I understand what the cost of goods sold does. I understand what it's going to take us for us to get to profitability. And I think that those, to me, Adam, are the CTOs who are just head and shoulders above the ones who can code a new little gadget overnight. I love those people. I'm one of those. I can lose myself in a project and in some technical rabbit hole. But man, the CTOs who can walk confidently into boardrooms and C-suites with knowing the business growth engine, understanding the technology vision to achieve that growth engine, through financial prowess, is able to bring that into the real world, and then to attract teams, and then can lead those teams to execute so that we can feed the growth engine. Oh my goodness. Give me that person. Put that on the blockchain.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, understanding the fundamentals of the business, what actually makes the business a business. I think it's one of those underrated skills of the best CTOs. And I've seen it myself. I've seen when you've seen CTOs who, like, they can architect their way out of unbelievable situations. But if they can do that in a way that makes financial sense, to deliver what it is that the business does, the core principal value of the business, that's the bit that is the difference between those CTOs who will get there eventually through trial and error, or those can go straight to the heart of the problem, figure out what it is, and as you say, find the right people to take on that journey of getting to the answer. Yeah.
So true. And when I started Seven CTOs in 2012, I learned this the hard way. I thought it was about technology and the tools and the team and the timing. I came up with the 4 T's and I was super proud of it. It's probably my most viral video, is probably the wrongest video I ever made. At the time, I was I was very proud of it because I basically titled it, "What is the role of CTO?" And oh my goodness. And that's what led me to where I am today with the books I'm writing, the frameworks that I'm in love with and proponent of, is because to me, it really moves in this realm of consistency,
right,
and immutability. Because note that I didn't say that what it looks like, what the focus is, what the technologies are. I mean, I'm not saying every job looks the same. I'm not saying every focus is exactly the same. I'm just saying that the role of CTO is that. I felt so strongly about it, Adam, that I created ctomanifesto.org. And I still haven't decided how I'm going to do this, but at ctomanifesto.org, I put this statement out there, like, this is what I believe the manifesto of a CTO should be. And then secondly, I feel so strongly about the financials that I created ctocore.org. I'm an entrepreneur like you, so
constantly starting things.
I think it's CTO. CTOcore.org talks about the financials. So
that's when you're an inventor, when you run out of you sort of lose track of the number of domain names you own.
Yes, I'm a domain name addict. But anyways, so I would love for your listeners to go check it out. Core stands for understanding your cost of goods sold, your OpEx, your revenues, and your earnings. So CORE. I really believe that if you can, I've got a couple ratios that I put up there for people to look at. And if you can walk into a executive stand-up or an executive sync-up or a board meeting and you've got this stuff down, you will be so different from every other same old chip on their shoulder CTO that you could probably double your salary by just knowing this stuff, because you would be irresistible.
Yeah, it's one of the things I always say, is being able to speak the language of the executive team, the language of the boardroom, which is essentially finance plus a little bit of domain-specific language. Being able to translate and bridge that gap between the two is a gold standard, I think, for a CTO.
Yeah. So thanks for asking me about that, because
So talking about having great frameworks and things you believe in strongly, I mean, you've got this book coming up very shortly, which is just a few days away as we record this. It'll probably be released by the time that this recording goes out. And it's called Liquid. I was absolutely intrigued when I read the title. I was like, where is this coming from? I'd love you to talk us through the concept of liquid and why it's so important.
I wrote Liquid with Kathy Keating and Scott Graves. The three of us have started a organization called Levels OS because we want to be custodians of the Levels framework, and then something we call the CTO Sentinel. And Liquid is the book that we wrote to start introducing these concepts.
Right.
And the book Liquid really talks about, it follows the journey of two founders, Alice and Theo. And the two of them are basically building a startup, and then they go through inexplicable issues. And all the while through the book, we describe what the invisible system that is at play is causing them to go through. So Liquid is a play on the different states that we see the organizations being in. So you can either be boiling, which is a state where everything goes, there are no rules, everything gets committed, everything is always in QA, or everything always doesn't pass QA. CEO is worried about why are more bugs being created, why, we add more people and then there's more problems.
Right.
The boiling state, and then we have the frozen state, which is there are so many rules that then get put in place to try and control the outcome that it just completely kills the organization. And what we want the CTO to look at is a fine balance. Like it's not like you hit it and it works. It's like you're constantly teetering between those states. And the thing that is causing us to have to keep our balance is the complex adaptive system that grows more and more complex the more we add money, people, features, customers, systems, requirements.
Yeah.
And all of that becomes an entity inside of a complex adaptive system that, as we know, has an exponential increase in the numbers of relationships between these entities. And so Liquid takes that complex adaptive approach to then also introduce what we call the CTO sentinels, which is speed, stretch, shield, and sales. And so this is the hard lesson that I learned as a CTO, which was no matter your technical prowess, no matter been there, done that, if you cannot speak to the CEO or to the board in those four terms, then you are just never going to be the CTO that the company needs. So speed, of course, you're never going to get away with not delivering. So speed is the speed of delivery. We're not giving you an out on that. So, you can be as businessy or as charismatic as you want, but if you're not delivering on the technical deliverables, then you are not even
missing the first requirement, basically.
Yes. Second is stretch, which is the ability to say, look at your organization as a CTO and say, these are the gaps, these are the vacancies, these are the capabilities, this is the Wardley mapping, this is what's missing for us to be able to build what the company needs. Now, this is where the hero complex of the CTO who can do anything all the time, right? Well, I don't care. I can just build my own ML ops because I'm going to Google, no, dude. You need to look at the budget. You need to tell your company how much it's going to cost. And you need to have the influence to be able to attract people to come to your company and build the things that your company needs. And I chose the word stretch because no one likes stretching. Stretch is not a fun thing. Stretch is not fun.
But it's something you have to do.
It's something you have to do. And so
it's a good phrase.
And then the third one is shield. So
shield,
always having a look out for how can I protect my company? So everything from the vulnerability scanning to threat modeling to, hack, blah, blah, blah. But where are the internal threats? where your own people could potentially be your greatest liability when they leave or when they, commit keys to the code repository, all the way through to what are the opportunities for us to build IP and know-how. And to imagine to be the CTO, because, a lot of times our founders and CEOs, they don't know what we're building. I mean, they look at the product level and they're like, okay, yes, the button works and the thing auto-populates and click, 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 great, it works. No, you actually built a phenomenal components library underneath of that. And you actually architected sheer brilliance. And imagine having a CTO who can go to their C-suite and say, hey guys, I have another way for us to monetize. Whether it improves the cost of goods sold and reduces that cost, or whether it actually expands revenue, or it opens up doors into new markets. I mean, Slack is a good example, right? They started off wanting to build X, and then the CTO built Y, and then that's what they became known for.
They completely pivoted onto it, didn't they?
Yes, I'm using X and Y because I can't remember in this very moment what it was. But and then the fourth sentinel is sales. So, and then it's really, I chose sales because it's influence. It's our ability as CTOs to be cross-functional, understand the business growth, be able to work with what is needed to be able to increase sales. And I always love a CTO who is loved by their sales team. And how hard is that, right? Because it's usually animosity.
Yeah, there's normally a tension there.
Because the salespeople are, I love a CTO who is loved by their product person and loved by their sales VP, because that to me tells me that there's a true solidarity happening in the C-suite. And something I learned very early on was, if you want to be successful in a C-suite, find out what success looks like to your other members of the C-suite and enable that. Just do that and you'll be a rock star.
Yeah. Just, listening to what the others are looking for, figuring out how you can deliver it on their behalf, with them or for them. Yeah, you're not likely to get booted out of your job if you do that.
No, you're going to have, on the contrary, you're going to have some advocates when the CEO wants to boot you. You're going to have some advocates for you to stay. So Liquid introduces those four concepts, which this is a whole different podcast, but I learned the hard way why those four are important. And the book explains it. And that's also the premise on which Levels was built. The Levels framework actually takes those four sentinels and really asks the question, at various levels of complexity, what do those sentinels look like? And so that was how Levels was born. And so that's why we didn't write a book that was just the definitive, this is what Levels is, because we want our CTOs to believe, we want you to buy into the thinking behind Levels.
Yeah.
Before you start looking at it as just, anybody can put together a grid and say all sorts of things. And the Levels assessments that we do, I must say, I'm really shocked at how brilliant that thing is. Like, I almost don't feel like, I just feel like it kind of walked into the room and I was able to write these things down, but I almost don't feel like it was made up. I almost feel like the whole community that we're all a part of made Levels, because the conversations were...
It stood the test of time, hasn't it?
Yes, and so that's why we give Levels away for free. We're not gatekeeping. It's at ctolevels.com. That's why I created Levels OS, because I want there to be some custody over just that we take good care of it, because there's a lot of playbooks, there's a lot of things, opinions about what we want to do, and so it's something that I want all CTOs on the planet to enjoy. It gives you the ability to go into any company and say, oh, this is a level X, but they're operating at a level Y. And you can instantly know what level the company should be operating at. And then through a quick assessment, you can see where the shortcomings are that you're actually stuck at. So colloquially, we say, if you're a level 4 company, then you typically have 20 plus engineers in your team. And so off the bat, oh, you should be a level 4 company. Now, how are you doing with level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3? And that's where we start seeing in the red, green, yellow assessment. When we start seeing reds, we start saying, listen, you should be at a level 4, but you're operating at a level 1, level 2.
Because you're missing some of those key things.
Yes, and we've seen some incredible relief, not only with full-time CTOs, but even fractional CTOs who can go into organizations and it's almost like you can see the thing that needs to be worked on before anyone else can see it. And it also is, because it's systemic, we often are indexing towards the symptoms that we see, when really there's a systemic issue happening beneath the surface. And levels helps uncover
it's a pretty straightforward framework to actually do the diagnosis on. I think in a lot of cases, it's very, very well mapped towards product companies.
Yes.
And very well mapped towards the sort of the scaling challenges that a lot of US product companies I see face. And for that, it's absolutely brilliant. So to come back to Liquid then, Liquid essentially gives you the theory, the understanding behind it, but with a narrative, with a story that makes it clear then. Is that, have I understood that fairly well? Yeah.
Yes. We introduced the practical frameworks for managing boundaries, signals, team dynamics, sustainable growth. And then we added the story because Kathy, and I want to give credit to Kathy, she's really brilliant at understanding who we're speaking to. Scott and I can get a little esoteric. Scott is brilliant. And then Kathy just rooted us into, hey, hang on, we can talk about all these theoretical concepts all day long, but how do we show our CTOs and our CEOs how this plays out in just everyday life? And so we introduced that story.
Make it real and make it relatable then.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it.
No, looking forward to it. So I'm going to go and see if I can get myself a copy once it becomes available, which by the time this is released, it should be actually available and online. So as I understand, it's going to be available on Amazon and there's other channels as well. I presume people can go and find it on as well.
Yes. So I think the release date's August 19th. So we're asking people for the first day purchase to help us boost our rankings. The pre-orders don't do much for helping us get on lists, so a little inside secret there is it's the first day purchase is really the gold. Yeah, and I'm very, very excited to hold a copy in my hand and see what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, if we try and summarize, the sort of the core elements of the book, where people obviously can go and read more about it then. So understanding the level of your business and the level of your operation within that business is the first stage. And then understanding the complexity based on those sentinels, those 4 S's, the speed, the stretch, the shield, the sales, and understand whether your processes are so chaotic and crazy that they're effectively boiling, therefore in the gaseous state, and therefore not what you want. Or the other end of the scale, you've got so many processes, constraints, rules, regulations that you're frozen, locked up, rigid, and therefore solid. And that analogy, that visual, okay, we need to be liquid, as a way of coming to the title of a book, I think that's utterly brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I was driving in the car with Kathy in Winter Park in Colorado, and we were like, what if we just called it Liquid? And initially Scott hated it because, he could see all the gaps in what we were saying. And then eventually he called us one day and said, no, actually, that's a great title. So yeah, I'm really proud of that. And Adam, I'm sure you've seen this when the lights go on for your clients, where they're like, oh, yes, I see the thing.
I get it.
The thing I'm fighting against, I see it. Even if it is boiling, it's like, oh, okay, I understand why I can't get any systems in place because this company is boiling. And then we provide very, very concrete steps for how to then fix or bring that boiling state down to liquid, because you can't use the same methods in both cases.
Absolutely.
I just want to ask quickly, are you doing your Basecamp thing?
Yeah, so Basecamp will have launched by the time this goes out. So the beta cohort will have started even before your book launches. And then the first full cohorts are going to be starting in October. So yes, the CTO Basecamp, first 2 cohorts. There's one cohort focused on the EU with EU timings, and then there's another cohort for US with US timings, and of course, price in US dollars. So those are the 2 cohorts running simultaneously starting from October, which I'm also very excited about as well.
That's so great. I'm so excited to hear more about that. I really think it's such a great, you're doing good work, man. Good work.
Thank you very much. It's great stuff. I'm looking forward to your book. And I always ask this of everybody who comes on the show. I'm fairly sure I know what you're going to say, but Etienne, if you were to give a young new CTO coming straight into job, one tip, one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would just say, learn the business, understand the product, learn the business.
I'm glad I was able to predict that one correctly. Etienne, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Adam.
How can people reach you? Is LinkedIn the best way?
Probably LinkedIn. I do blog over at my website, etiennex.com. So ETIENNEX.com. And then, of course, 7 CTOs. If you want to find a peer group, 7 and then CTOs. And then with my levels work, we have an imprint we're going to use for all our books. So it's called CTOsentinel.com. And it also tells people more about the Sentinel. So no, a lot going. Like I said, I am a domain name freak.
So we'll put a couple of links onto the episodes so people can find you and then find some of the other things from those links. Etienne, it's been great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you very much for listening all the way through to the end. Just before you go, I'd like to ask you for one thing in return for putting together all these episodes of the CTO Playbook podcast for you. Please leave a review. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whichever platform you're on, leaving a quick review will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.